the air is cleaner.
Uh,
Yeah, less traffic. The traffic has been poor in the last few days, and I've thought, goodness me, there's 4 cars at the traffic lights. This is just unrealistic, Not
yeah.
happy about that.
Hmm. Yeah, look, and just like Lee Ilkwood also talks about it, the fact that people are placing less and less importance on cars because
Mm,
they've now placed more importance on lifestyle and quality, and so
mm.
that industry is also going to have a quite a big whack. Yeah, the traveling less. I would like to see a couple of years from now the impact, although the impact so far has not been, they talk about carbon emissions only 5.5% down. And anyway, we don't know. I mean, we'll see. I suppose it takes longer than the few months that we've been.
Yes, it will be interesting. The other side will be interesting. For those of you, we have gone live and we're waiting another 6 minutes to have people to join us. But for those of you who are just joining us, having a chat with Callie Vandermeer from DP Partnership and just discussing the challenges of COVID, of coming out of COVID, potentially the challenges of being doing live Zoom meetings and other Facebook meetings and Teams meetings as opposed to driving in the car and the benefits of not having the car on the road currently. So if you join us, we won't be too long. We'll be commencing shortly. So, Callie, sorry, you were saying it'll be interesting to see the other side of what we go back to, and do we want to go back to what we had before?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we are creatures of habit, and this time now has been long enough for those habits to be impacted, to be changed, to be, we've discovered new things. We've learned to be independent and function autonomously, and we've we've I think grown accustomed to the new relationships that we've had, like just family and privacy and the choice of
Mm,
whether you want to mix or not mix. There's the saying that you go to an office to be interrupted.
yep.
Uh, and that is true. The amount of work that you can actually do an hour at home versus an hour in the office.
Oh, polar extreme.
And so there'll never be a total correction to the way things were, and so it shouldn't be because it was wrong. It's broken in so many ways.
Yeah, yeah, too much activity. It's a funny thing. Often refer to of myself as an outgoing introvert because while I really love people, I also really need my own space and downtime. And so it's not until I got through the isolation period and suddenly when I'm actually not as much of an introvert as I thought I was. I really like the social interaction. Somebody has come in recently and said, can we please do events in this space again? They're missing that public contact and the opportunity to gather together and so there's something different about being physically in the same space as another human being and not all of us work remotely but some of us do and if as a single person when you're mixing with only yourself day in day out it can be quite tiresome so it's interesting to understand yourself particularly in this time.
We are social beings, and that's why my fascination with my our company's fascination with the restaurant space. People
Mm,
don't go to restaurants to eat; they can eat at home. They go to restaurants to socialize, even if they're not talking to the person next to them. They're in a space with other people, and they're in a
mm,
space where they talk to a waiter and they kind of observe what other people are doing and eating and mannerisms and so people go to restaurants because they want to be amongst other people. We're just hardwired like this,
mm.
and so there'll definitely be that need, but I think there'll be a real balance, like a pullback into actually spending more quality time, uh, alone time and time with family and we'll see. I mean, there's so many people saying, so many futurists
Mm.
now saying so many things, and a lot of it's quite vague because we simply don't know.
We
No,
don't know. Has it made you think differently about what you want from your life or
oh,
what you'd
100,
like to create as a designer post-COVID?
100%. And I think most designers probably have had that kind of introspection. So look, the path that I've kind of drawn out is quite different from the one I'm on now. and we'll see, you know, if you put your mind to it, if that happens, and you need to make it happen. Like you make projects happen for your clients, you need to make your own ones happen and kind of will it into being. So I'm confident. I mean, I'm excited. As I said, I love the space that we are in. I love the new beginnings, and the fact that we've all hit the same reset button at the same time across the world.
Well, when has that happened before? It's unique in history, isn't it? Unless there's been potential wars or plagues or famines, that's the world has been in the same space, which is interesting.
Yeah, the reset button is there for us all, and we're all grappling with the same things and looking towards each other for answers. So we're all kind of almost hand holding. There's a new kind of humility that I've never seen, and that humility brings all kinds of people. I think people will be working together in all kinds of interesting ways moving forward. And certainly, as I said to you before, my new kind of explorations, it's like working together. You have this, I have that, you know, together we can do X. Why don't we do it? Yes, let's do it. Everybody's looking for those new partnerships. So yeah, I'm loving this new beginning.
Collaboration's always a good thing, right? I think I'm the consummate collaborator. I don't think we can do, if you want to go far, if you're going to go fast, you go on your own. If you want to go far, you go with others, right? You do it together as a team, and it's. I think you have the opportunity to be catalytic with each other, and bring something exciting to the future.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I would love to had a bit of a crystal ball though to see what's around the bend a bit more, but none of us have that, right?
No, we don't have one of those, but at any rate, I'm going to get moving. It's 6 p.m. and I'm sure we've got quite a few viewers. So I just a couple of tedious things that we need to get out of the way before we move on with the fabulous Callie Vandermeer this evening. Welcome to the live streamed events at Caroma on Collins. Our flagships are currently open both in Sydney and in Adelaide. We'd love to see you in store. If you feel like coming out for a cup of coffee and gaining some assistance from us and or just catching up, we'd love to see you. We're missing seeing you in the space, and we're looking forward to seeing you again. We trust that your families and you are safe at this time, and thankful that Australia, to many degrees, and also New Zealand, we've got a lot from New Zealand this evening, have dodged a bit of a COVID bullet. So thankful that we're all in this space together. Remote consultations are here if you don't want to leave the home. We're just talking about transportation with Callie. If you'd prefer to get some assistance from our staff, we do have remote consultations, and I'm more than happy to be of assistance there for you. We do have some upcoming events that I'd love to tell you about, and as of tomorrow, I'll send you the most updated EDM that will disclose those events. We've got CPD points. We're alternating between CPD points for architects and also events for renovators with the likes of Naomi Findlay, James Mason, Bernadette Jansen, talking about renovation, isolation and what's new, and also Emma Bloomfield, that we also have CPD points. So coming up, we've got WeatherTech's Timber and the Low Carbon Economy. That's coming up shortly. Dr. Peter Swetman. Pete is one of our staff members, and he's talking about designing bathrooms to fit our future selves, something to consider in our own designing of our own homes, but also for our clients. ArtMade. Sharif is coming to do what future looks like for childcare design post-COVID. So exciting stuff coming up. Would love you to join us again, either in store or online for the events. And it's a pleasure to have you, albeit virtually, in the Caroma Temple this evening. So we've dispensed with a few formalities. What I would like to tell you is that I will be giving the CPD certificates out possibly in the next few days. So bear with me once you send in your questionnaires. You can send it to my email. I'll sort those out. Don't send it to Callie because he's designing. He's busy doing other important stuff. So Callie, I just want to tell you a little bit about who Callie is. Callie originally started his career as an architect, as the founder of Design Partnerships South Africa and Australia. His practice became increasingly aware of the need for true empathy and fascinated with the impact in predictive human behaviour on design. Callie's personal attention gradually shifted to the social spaces of hospitality design, an intersection of creativity and commerce. Of course, COVID-19 has probably affected his industry the most, and he's here today to share some of his thoughts around this impact with you. And so, please, without further ado, Callie Vandermeer, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So my talk today is Design in the Age of Social Distancing. I as part of my journey, this talk explores perhaps questions that we've had in our approach to design post-COVID. So it's more questions really than answers in many of the times. Conceptually exploring the appraisals and traditional ideas and concepts that lead towards the development of so many coherent proposals, or questioning those coherent proposals for projects. So what are these proposals in the new normal? How do we evaluate projects not fully understanding what people would want and how they would act? It's impossible to know. How do we measure viability of the conceptual and schematic resolutions? And what is this new user that we are responding to? What is the appropriate social and environmental considerations? These are all questions that we have to raise. And we can answer these only really confidently if we know and can predict that new user experience. What is that interface? We don't really know at the moment. And so the age-old adage of design ignoring people that ignores design is probably now more true than ever. How do we not ignore people? It is always good to look at past, present, and future to get a good sense of where to go in times like this. So we need to kind of explore history, and that we can do. It's written, it's happened. We can observe the present, and I think a lot of work needs to be done there. And we can perhaps listen to a few trend forecasters to listen to what they have to say. We know trend forecasters, but there's no harm in kind of listening to that and seeing where that mind space is at. So perhaps today, I think a lot more questions than answers. But as Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, says, a good question beats a good answer any day. So I hope you agree. The problem with the internet, so in compiling this talk, the problem with the internet, if I can say it as a problem, and now more than ever, is that everyone's become a doctor and everyone a designer, and it's become increasingly difficult really to deliver a compelling talk of true substance and true meaning without kind of sounding repetitive, because all the things are really out there. So let me just get to my slide. Let me share a slide. Let me just start with the slides. Right. So what I wanted to do today is, as I say, I thought my talk would become quite boring and repetitive if I kind of relayed all the information that I could find online, and the kind of experience that we've had, but maybe just touching on that. So we've spent the last 25 years building a company that specializes in space informed by predictive human behavior. So that's really what we observe, and thus by extension what people would want, or how we expect them to behave in certain types of scenarios and spaces. And that path has led us really out of architecture to retail and hospitality design, and eventually focusing purely on restaurant design. So my talk may be a little bit skewed in that area of experience. Our design is always informed by people. And as I said before, it's a Frank Chimera quote, really, that people ignore design that ignores people. So to this end, I found that people really also relate to stories a lot better than they relate to just normal talking. So I'd like to share some stories with you today, and that's, let me just reshare. Sorry, give me a second. Guys, give me a second. I think I'm not sharing my screen properly. Share
Yes, it looks like it's coming on, Callie. We've got mum cooked dinner reminder in 22 minutes.
Oh, yes. Are we good?
We're good.
Are we good? Okay. So, so today I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to relay. Well, I'm going to base my talk on three stories. It's a story of horse manure, a story of modernism, and a story of plastic surgery. I hope I've got your attention. So it's the year. Let me just get you a second slide. It's the year 1894. In the bustling streets of Greater London, the population has grown to a staggering 6.5 million souls. In order for London to function, it needs 50,000 horses per day for personal transport and for deliveries and to pull all the cabs and trams. New York needs double that at 100,000. Each horse producing between 15 and 35 pounds of horse manure each day. That's a staggering amount. In addition, with the amount of horses around, many of them die on the streets and are left there often to petrify before they're cut up and removed. So the cities are beginning to kind of literally drown in horses and manure, spreading all kinds of disease and illness. In 1898, as a result of this, because this becomes a world problem, not only in New York, in London, every world city, an urban planning conference is convened specifically to deal with this international crisis. It's a 10-day conference, but on the third day, it's called to a close. And the reason really is that the delegates cannot see any possible solution to the growing crisis posed by urban horses and their outputs. The outlook becomes extremely gloomy. The New York Times sensationally predicts that in 50 years' time, every street would be buried in 9 feet of horse manure. It seems that urban civilization, as we know it, is doomed. It becomes known as the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. But of course, urban civilization was not doomed. In the early 1900s, a group of engineers comes seemingly left field, the most notable Henry Ford, and with the arrival of the horseless carriages, the great crisis vanishes virtually overnight. Sorry, I forgot to get to my slide feed. So the takeout here is simple. The fundamental problem with and sorry, on the slide you can see slides or photographs not often published, but there you have it. The fundamental problem with most predictions, and specifically those very gloomy ones, are that they make a critical false assumption that things will go on as they are. They never do. That events are linear. They never are. And COVID-19 out of nowhere, probably the best example of that. In addition, most often the solution is, of course, not in managing or solving a problem with the same set of tools that created that problem in the first place. So where to from here? Well, in the last 3 months, Zoom meetings and nice to e-meet you has become as colloquial and commonplace as rain and Trump tweets. Outside of physical space, these varied combinations of new media, social and other more advanced forms, combined with various delivery platforms, will have a massive impact, or third-party delivery platforms, will have a massive impact on maintaining connectivity between purveyor and patrons, between establishment and clients. And with the changed customer behavior driven by changed habits and fear, combined with a high likelihood of reduced or customer density of self-enforced customer density, returning 100% to these previous models seems a little bit unlikely. So just coming back to kind of our experience. So some restaurant brands for example, have excelled and have used this time of forced downtime to innovate and to pivot to much more successful operating models than pre-COVID. Some media or social media experience and cooking channels have exploded. Chipotle came out of the gates fast with Chipotle Together on Zoom, both Zoom and Instagram, featuring celebs and musicians. They focus on entertaining to the distant customers to maintain that connection, and in the process drive sales with time-limited codes for free entrees, and this only revealed during the broadcast. On the opposite scale is Experience Design Studio Kitchen Theory. They created multi-sensory dining at home services consisting of 4 to 6 course menus, tableware, table dressing, a playlist, a virtual chef, and so kind of almost literally transplanting the restaurant experience to your home. Diner chain Denny's, took it to a new level of e-commerce by creating a brand account for all major gaming platforms. So that's phenomenal. This allowed, but it still allows players to access discount codes whilst playing. And the result was that it hit the maximum number of friends for a single Nintendo Switch account in one day. Starbucks, which we are maybe a little bit more familiar with, they started last year with experimental pickup only stores. The first one opened in New York at the end of last year, I think it was. And that's now likely perfectly positioned. In response to COVID-19, they've just announced a couple of days ago that they'll be closing 400 of the traditional outlets in the next few years, and will now be aggressively focusing on convenience-led platforms such as their drive-thrus on the left of the slide there, and the curbside and Starbucks pickup locations that you can see there in the middle. My lights has gone out here. I need to move. There it goes on. Together, all of these mean that the idea of a hospitality brand and our experience of it sometimes tied to a specific place, time, and format switches now to something infinitely more fluid and tacit. And what the exact format and outcome will be, what that will be, I think nobody really knows. Time will tell. But I think be prepared for very big disruptions. Story 2, a story of modernism. It's 1918. Cholera, tuberculosis, and the Spanish flu wreaks havoc in Europe and the Americas. Spanish flu alone infects an estimated 500 million people, a third of the world's population, and leads to an estimated death toll of a staggering 50 million. All reports differ. Sanitation is top of mind. Spitting in public is outlawed in most of Europe and America, and it becomes a well-known fact that dry TB carrying droplets can survive and remain infectious in household dust. And that leads to the popular English catchphrase, 30 years in the dark, 30 seconds in the sun. And this reinforces public awareness of the medicinal potency of sunlight and leads to big windows, open courtyards, and accessible flat roofs. Now, modernist construction techniques aside, there was, of course, contemporary and new materials such as concrete, steel, and large panes of glass that allowed all kinds of possibilities. But compelling motivations and arguments come in the way that architects really respond to these radical disruptions. So 20th century architects see design in large part as an anesthetic to the sickness of overcrowded cities and a response to the ravages, not only of disease, but also of war, and promote kind of clean lines and smooth surfaces, stripped of needless clutter, kind of as an offering to cleansing physically and symbolically from disease and pollution. Le Corbusier further urges people to eliminate carpets, and not only him, it's kind of a modernist ideal, and heavy furniture, and keep the floors and walls clear. In 1925, he envisions a Spartan city where every home is whitewashed. There are no more dirty, dark corners. Everything is shown as it is. But like anything and everything, any radical idea needs, of course, a susceptible audience that's ready to receive this. And of course, with the generally scared and emotionally unsettled population, modernism is not, excuse me, it's not only born, but becomes one of the most enduring and defining styles of all time. Modernist furniture, in turn, also reflects these concerns, with designers opting for lightweight, washable materials in streamlined forms. And with this creates an explosion of minimalist designs, from Michael Tonnet's bentwood chairs, very well still used today, Alvar Aalto's bent plywood, and Marcel Brewer and Mies van der Rohe using tubular steel in all kinds of creative and interesting new ways. A lot of that furniture, of course, designs still iconic pieces today, easily movable for cleaning. This furniture, of course, deprived dust and insects of hiding places in the dark, so to speak. So, of course, COVID will have some impact on design and style. I think that is inevitable. Clients that cannot demand new spacing will demand more of a originality in order to be attractive to a new, far more competitive landscape, and potentially a smaller end user number crowd. And to this end, originality and decadent escapist interiors may gain mass popularity, and that's according to a trends report by a Dubai-based studio called Raw. And they talk about original escapist design creating slightly surreal, special experiences in restaurants. Another panelist predicts a potential return to a new form of architectural modernism. For obvious reasons, we may also see a strong return to things like roadhouses, drive-ins, theaters, things that have kind of disappeared with the market forces of pre-COVID. So there'll be a return potentially of those. Open kitchens as built-in theatre, again, just touching on restaurants, essentially, and I won't stay on restaurants. There used to be a big draw. This openness to promote transparency will remain, albeit now potentially with glass or plexiglass as a barrier between the kitchen and the customer space. Fewer diners and fewer people really in everything, in any environment, and increased distances and people wearing masks and potentially gloves, and that disconnection, that reduces social reward. The reason people go out to public space, that kind of hardwiring that we have as social beings, and that may need some appropriate and qualified addressing. Well, a lot of thoughts, I think. Restrooms are probably in any public space the highest contact zone, and this will need a lot of thinking. Bathrooms may be redesigned to limit doors. Those that remain will need to maybe have foot handles or or sensors, sensors in soap dispensers, taps, hand dryers, trash cans, anything really that we normally touch will need some really creative new thoughts. And finally, signage. There's been a lot of or potential. It's kind of a lot of signage has been kind of relegated to the wings, and a lot of branding. And I think there'll be a strong return of that, and the impact and importance of that. And I think that'll regain part of place and maybe central to new design solutions. So cleverly done to reinforce hygiene protocol and remind guests to maintain distancing. This may be in the form of subtle and clever clues in subtle design details on walls and floors, maybe even tables, and menus, markers of all kinds, and potential tongue-in-cheek artwork on the walls. A lot of the subtle clues would live on screens and the like that may become very important additions to social spaces. They might not be as effective, but it'll certainly speak to the psychology of a consumer that needs to feel protected in a social environment. Story 3, story of plastic surgery. Fast forward 30 years or so later, Maxwell Maltz, plastic surgeon in the 1950s, begins to notice a strange phenomena. When Dr. Maltz would perform an operation, like a nose job, for example, he found that it would take the patient a minimum of 21 days to get used to just kind of seeing their new face and getting comfortable with it. Similarly, when a patient had an arm or leg amputated, he notices that the patient would sense a phantom limb for at least 21 days before adjusting to the new situation. And this kind of experience prompts him to write a great deal of books around this, as he notices his own adjustment period in his own behaviors, and sensing that 21 days was a kind of minimum time for him to form a new habit. So, and his work was groundbreaking, and it influenced nearly every major self-help professional, from Zig Ziglar to Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins. But like a long game of telephone, people began to forget that he said a minimum of 21 days and shortened it to it takes 21 days to form a new habit. We love to shorten things, and we love to speed things up, and sometimes time is needed. The reality is that on average, it takes more than 2 months to form a new habit, 66 days to be exact. At the time of writing this, it's the 77th day since the crowds at the Melbourne Grand Prix got denied access on the day of the event, with today, 1 June, as I wrote it, not today, but the day I wrote this, marked the partial opening of restaurants and bars to 50 people. So 77 days. So of course, there'll be new habits, and of course, this will have an impact on behavior and an impact on design as a result. And the takeout here is quite simple. I think we can safely say that if a miracle cure for COVID-19 was found today, we are not simply bouncing back to the way things were. Things may overshoot in the short run, but eventually our behavior, in other words, the way that we do not touch, the home deliveries, the family time, and all the little conveniences of less travel, more independence, more productivity that we've become used to, that will leave a permanent mark. And the behavior, therefore, of the average person has been permanently altered, whether we like it or not. By how much, only time will tell. So just looking at some companies, and in line with that kind of thinking, So Bompas and Pa started, that was started by two friends, Sam Bompas, a marketer, and Harry Pa, an architect at the time and became a dropout when they started this company. And they do crazy, immersive things, all crazy mashups of food and food history and science lab experiments, like breathable cocktail vapors, gherkin-powered watts of energy, jelly buildings. They did an alcoholic architectural bar in Borough Market in London. In truth, they are perhaps more jokey postmodernists, artists, alchemists, and definitely very crafty businessmen. And they suggest that following this period of wearing gloves and face masks and maintaining these 2-meter distances from other people, whatever it is in different countries, that people will struggle to get back, getting back to, or used to touch again. I mean, we can see it when we walk the street. Nobody touches a traffic light with their hands. It's all with the elbow. The behavior is the same. What are those impacts? What will those impacts be, really? It is almost impossible to say. But they say that one of the things that may gain popularity would be haptics museums, which will encourage people to interact with objects and other people. Things like dunk your hand in a pool of slime, stroke a wall of fur, or feel your way through a maze whilst blindfolded. So really being aware of your hands and touch and feel. That's one of their reports. A sensory stimulating experience. They reckon that'll encourage people to fall in love with touch again. So they've done quite a bit of work on that idea, or that line of thinking. So then there are the views of Lee Edelquist. Give me a second. She's one of the world's most famous trend forecasters, and I think many of you would know who she is. She was named by Icon magazine as one of the 40 most influential people in design. She is an intuitive thinker who travels the world studying evolution of socio-cultural trends. And then she puts it down and kind of cross-compares it to things that happen across the world, and things that are driven by design and things that are driven by other popular thinking, and condenses that into a book or books. And really she touches on everything, from industries as diverse as fashion, where she really started, textiles, interior design, cars, cosmetics, and food, really on everything that drives human behavior. And she, so these books then gets used by marketers across all platforms across the world. She's, by the way, currently stuck in a hotel in South Africa after giving a talk at Design Indaba. She has some alarming and compelling arguments. She echoes my views that suggest that the impact of the outbreak has slowed down our pace and changed our views and habits to the point where we will or may refuse en masse to take planes, work and prefer to work from home, entertain more amongst close friends and families, learn to be more self-sufficient and a lot more mindful. She feels that suddenly fashion shows will look kind of bizarre and out of place as our minds have shifted. The travel ads that enter our computers, our computer space, may seem invasive and ridiculous, and the thought of future projects a little bit vague and inconclusive. How will it matter? So every new day now, we question each, and we have really en masse, question each system that we have known since birth, and we're obliged to consider the possible demise of many things that we've become used to. She goes on to say that for several years we have understood that in order to survive as a species and to keep the planet going, we need to make draconian changes to the way that we live, the way we travel, consume, and entertain. And there's no way we can continue to produce as many goods and the many choices we have grown accustomed to is the debilitating mass of information and debilitating mass of consumption about nothing at all often has really numbed our culture in so many ways. But there's a growing awareness amongst younger people, younger generation, that ownership and the hoarding of clothes and cars, that is no longer attractive. And this has been coming for quite a while, but it's almost come to its zenith now, in the time of COVID. And so we've had like the postponement this year of the Milan Design Week, the Venice Architectural Biennale, and the Hajj. These things are all economic disasters in their own right, but they're also emotional disasters in many ways. So apart from the sort of the accumulation of the money that stopped circulating, and on many ways everything is shaken. Luxury brands are shaken, especially airlines, of course, completely shaken. Hospitality, completely shaken. I know that firsthand. Electronics, foods, everything really. There's a knock-on to everything that we do know. And unfortunately, in this disaster, there's no immediate cure. And I'm not pessimistic really in it. There goes my light again. I have to move to get this light to work. So we will have to pick up on the residue and reinvent a lot of things from scratch once the virus is under control. And this is where she is hopeful for another, well, so many people are talking about it, but specifically she now hopeful for another better system to be put in place with more respect for human labor, more respect for the conditions. And in the end, we will be forced to do the things that we should have done already in the very first place. According to Edelkurt, if we are wise, which sadly we know we are not, we will start up again with a set of new rules, a set of new regulations and qualities, introducing cottage industries that would flourish and grow into new arts and crafts, where manual labor and the handmade is valued and cherished above everything else. So what some of those perhaps more direct, perhaps less philosophical takeouts may be, and have a bearing on us as architects and designers, some of those potentially more or less philosophical, let's just look at some more direct ones. So Edelkurt, just coming back, I'll touch on that briefly again, sees a rebirth of collective creative studios that would produce ideas for several brands at a time, bringing about an economy of scale with a much lighter environmental footprint. Local instead of global would gain momentum, according to her. People-based initiatives will take over with more bartering systems, open tables, farmers markets, street events, far more dominant DIY aesthetic. She has for a while peddled this idea, this future forecast for the age of the amateur, what she calls the age of the amateur, and says that now this has now come a lot faster than she originally anticipated. So this really, and it's quite logical if you think about the space that we are in, that people have, there's so many online courses and people have found design interesting, and it's always been interesting, and it's been this kind of a mysterious place that designers occupied, but there's so many new bits of technology that's democratized that space, and so many courses and so much information. So by extension, all these kind of self-taught designers So by extension, we need to expect to have to upskill and learn a lot more about the added value and insights that developers or our clients may not have. How do we bring that value? Creativity will become one of the highest assets in this space, according to Edelquist. But designers, they thrive in constraints. We've always needed constraints to thrive. The constraints to make us think around the bend, around the corner, to make true magic happen. I think some of the most best disruption and best work done in a long time will happen in the next couple of years as a result. So another example, Holly Howard, I'm just quoting a couple of people, founder of a Brooklyn-based business consultancy, and described as Europe's #1 business mentor, sees a new future full of potential for architects and designers based on the fact that most developers will see many opportunities when the landscape clears of businesses that didn't survive. A more pressing issue will be designers' ability to justify their services and their worth in a meaningful way. She predicts that pricing our services will be less about the industry standard or what the market will bear, and much more about perceived value, understanding how to translate the impact of our work to a dollar amount that will resonate with our clients. Jared Miller, a design consultant, echoes these thoughts, or a consultant to designers, more specifically. He shepherded many design firms through the 2008 financial crisis, and he's hopeful about the post-pandemic consumption. Something like interior architecture, for example, he sees as a discretionary item, something that was easily and maybe still easily put on hold. He says, but as soon as there's some certainty, in this case, certainty maybe meaning a sense of a reality around a vaccine, and that things will start to return to normal and calm down in his mind, and as he says, as they always do, he anticipates pent-up demand for design services. There'll be a surge in purchasing once the economy is back, he says. Katie Saunders, she's a founder of Pop and Grey, a brand design and strategy firm for interior designers, thinks that people will want to invest in their residences more than ever. The post-COVID client will be more attuned to flaws in their homes after spending a lot of time locked up in them, she says. Suddenly the little annoyances that they've overlooked for years will now become big things that must be fixed right now, and they'll be willing to pay a premium to have it done. Offices will undoubtedly transform in the near future, in the near and distant future. That's according to Kelly Griffin, principal of the architect firm in BBJ, who leads its workplace strategy group. Offices may evolve to become more intentional, meaning that much of the heads down work will happen at home, and the physical workplace becomes a place to connect with others, because that's how we kind of wired. There's still that connection, the connection is still needed. So that'll lead to increased social space, amenities and conference rooms as being more important. And the physical office is here, so as a result, she says, to stay. Office culture will remain, and remain as an integral part of the employee's experience for most companies. And Cheryl Durst, Vice President of IIDA in Chicago, says that in terms of the day-to-day activities, design firms will lean on co-workers and community a lot more. As designers and design professionals, we are accustomed to putting humans and their needs first, she says. So in this brave new world, we'll see that the skills and abilities that designers afforded to us, things like empathy, curiosity, patience, common sense, and problem solving are going to become more crucial than ever. So let me just get back to me. And how do I do that?
He wants to go back to just Callie being on the main screen. Vanessa will do that for you, Callie.
Yes. So I think in terms of this kind of final kind of parting thoughts, are we there? Back to me?
Indeed.
Great. The panic and disruption, as we experience it now, will end. It'll be a new normal. There'll be lasting changes for good and for the good. In the end, however, and in the short term, it's far more about managing perceptions and emotions. It'll be about how we make people feel as it really has always been. Safety comfort perhaps now trumping physical comfort. And ending maybe on a bit of a positive note, remember that we've had pandemics before. The Black Plague most notably carried on for centuries and killed 25 million people. An amusing little side story. So Isaac Newton, I just read it in Flipboard this morning, proposed extracting toad vomit as a cure by hanging the toad upside down in a chimney for 3 days to extract the insect-infused vomit made into lozenges. I think we can safely say that we've come a very long way since then. And also remember that the 1918 Spanish flu was followed by the Roaring Twenties, one of the best times in business and the mindset of consumers. So let's have great expectations. Thank you.
Callie, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sure there's questions and answers. We obviously have the CPD points to go through, but prior to that, I wonder whether we can answer a couple of questions that perhaps I'm sure others would like to know that there's a few we've made earlier. So what do you think the real impact of COVID-19 will be on design in the short to medium term?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think it's difficult to say, but I've got a concern in a couple of things. For example, I mentioned this to you before we went live, that we have a lot of, like in the restaurant, that kind of hospitality space where people have kind of grasped at the straws of third-party delivery platforms as a desperate act to make ends meet, and those platforms are, you know, they're probably here to stay. Those guys are and they have all the information and so they've made that there's a disconnect now between restaurateur and clients, and that's across multiple platforms. Really, what's happened, what Amazon has done to retail, these platforms have done to hospitality, and people will bounce back into social space. They have a need, but they'll settle somewhere in the middle to something that's a bit of both. And I think the best restaurants are the ones that are going to take or do or the best business of any kind will have that omni-channel that'll sit comfortably on all channels, every single point that people can engage with the brand. That's really going to become a lot louder. That volume definitely will be turned up quite strongly.
Fantastic. What can designers do to be more attractive in their services to the potential new client base?
Traditional education has always lagged the need of economy, the need of where the rubber hits the road, and that string or that delay, that lag, has become a lot longer. And I think designers will need to upskill and really understand what those real short-term needs are, what the human needs are, what's it's all driven by people. It's all driven by things that people want and need, things that people are scared of, things that people desire. And because that shift is so dramatic and it's touched not a part of a country or a geography, it's international, that shift is enormous. And so I think a mass awareness of that kind of predictive human behavior is needed. So anything really to understand that a lot better. I think if you can answer to those things and understand it very well, you'll be able to answer designs and kind of really turn on the volume again on that empathy. You'll be able to answer and design a lot more effectively to any brand and kind of push back on certain things as well.
Mm. Empathy being the key one there, I think. I think we've
Yeah.
all got a little bit more empathy, post-COVID empathy. What are you personally doing, or what have you done during the lockdown period to ensure that you not only survive, but thrive post this pandemic?
We've had our kind of pet projects that have sat in the wings for too long. Things that we've been drawn to do, like designing a range of things that can go online. I think if one doesn't start living online in effective and meaningful ways, it's going to be problematic. So we've been developing a couple of things that we're going to be pushing online very strongly shortly. The first idea, we have 3 streams really, but the first idea going live hopefully in the next 30 or so days. We've just received the final prototypes, and so we spend a lot of time on that, and we've spent a lot of time on thinking also what this new normal is going to be, and the things that would be needed in our kind of corner of the woods, our neck of the woods. So we've designed a couple of things that will also sit in those physical spaces that will be needed. And as I said prior, a lot of those things are not necessarily the real solution, but they're psychological safety nets for consumer when they go to the space. So you at least feel safe. And that's probably the most important thing, to make people feel comfortable. So psychological comfort, really. And so we spend a lot of time on thinking about that.
Awesome. Another question before we throw to the live audience for questions. What examples do you perhaps have of other firms that have done remarkable or disruptive things to ensure that they remain top of mind in a post-COVID marketplace?
There's one as a French designer. He and I showed that slide early on with the big bubbles that sit over your head as you sit at a table. I don't know that that's going to be comfortable to be in. It's called Plex Eats, and I don't know if that's going to be a comfortable thing to sit in, but at least it's quite mind-blowing. It's quite groundbreaking, and that thing's been published across every single design, every single platform, everywhere. Just open it up and it's there. So certainly, I think as when I started talking, one doesn't have to have all the answers. I think if one questions enough, there's enough questioning going on. Like, I don't know that he's really touting that thing as an answer. I think he's questioning, and he's put some real examples out there, and he's developed it, and so it's quite groundbreaking. And then there's a lot of people that have developed, a lot of firms, these big plastic domes, big that can take a seating of say 8 people, and there's some of that in Paris, and there's in Netherlands there's these glass I would call them private dining cubicles that sit on the sides of the river, and they become great things. I think I can imagine sitting there in Paris in the snow with under these domes and at night and looking at the stars. I think it's phenomenal. So people have been quite creative, and there's a lot of things obviously that won't work, and seen some proposals of to create proximity that to put dummies in place and seats between. And I know there's silly things that'll never work, but at least people are trying a lot of things, and out of that, amazing things will grow.
Beautiful. I've got a question here. Spanish flu, roaring 20s, good, but the 20s with the Great Depression, not so good. How do we avoid a not so good follow-up?
Nobody knows. I mean, I read again this morning, Canada wants to put their housing markets on temporary hold. They want to stop people from selling homes because they are incredibly scared of a bursting housing bubble. There's a what is the guy's name? Jeremy Gratham, I think. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's an investment strategist, and I read last night or this morning that he says, or he sees this COVID space as the real bubble, the bubble of all bubbles. So he's incredibly concerned, and when he was asked on what value one will still have in American companies and share portfolios, he said zero, and less than zero is even better. So I mean, there are the alarmists, and and I'm no economist, and I don't know how to answer that question, but there are people worried, and there are people really concerned, and then there are those that things will bounce back, but there'll definitely be a completely new normal. You can't reduce interest rates across the world anymore. There's no space to move, really. Things have to change radically, and we don't know what it'll be.
We don't indeed. Kelly O'Connell is asking, Callie, do you think that homes will need to be reinvented or will look different in the future to facilitate this new work from home environment? Are they shaped differently or just designed for zoning?
I think the one thing that I've been thinking a lot about really is, certainly in our home it was, and I think everybody's experienced that. So we had I had one daughter that she just started working. She needed an office space. The other one at school, she needed to go on Zoom to do homeschooling. I needed to do my work, and my wife was stuck at home as well. So we were 4 people. We had no office space at home, suddenly needing 4 office spaces. So it ended up being in our bedrooms, and things that we could fold up and push away. So I think that little friction spot will need a lot of thinking. I think a lot of people will come up with very creative, interesting pieces of furniture that could double up. Because the other thing, and you and I spoke about it just before we went live again, the tiny home movement, that's not going to go away. That's here to stay. And that's, look at how small and how tiny some of those things are, and how inventive storage space around every single staircase underneath, nothing wasted. And the non-waste is going to become the big thing. So I think there we'll see, and maybe not the way homes are designed, but rather the way furniture designers thinks of that problem and solves it.
So the multifunctional joinery, the multi-room environments where we can push back and create kitchens in different spaces. I mean, I think we less is more sometimes, right? A question here from as anonymous, actually. So the restaurant example that you gave, yes, the platform's more prevalent and here to stay, but we know that those platforms cost a lot more for restaurateurs and can make it harder for them to turn a profit while putting the profits into third parties' pockets at the restaurateur's expense. Is that a good outcome and a fair distribution?
So the numbers I actually know, so it's anywhere from 29, 28 to 33, 34%. It's a massive part. And I've had that discussion with a lot of my clients, and they're confident that they've done the numbers, that they had to buy the scooters or cars, that they had to employ the people directly, and the cost, the ancillary costs related to all of those, that they've done those numbers, and the numbers are on track, that the numbers are correct. And that the number really is a number sitting on top of or used to sit, really, not anymore, used to sit on top of their usual monthly turnover. So of course, now COVID's come, and it's the number instead of, and there's the problem. That problem is now, so if you did a 70-30, so we would always kind of, not we would always, but we're aware of the fact that a 30% takeout or less than was healthy in a normal restaurant, or normal, say even a QSR, which quick service restaurants, or fast dining, quick dining type of restaurant. So that the less than 30 was healthy, more than 30 unhealthy. And now we've had that now in the COVID time, where it's definitely gone over that 30 mark, and it's definitely cannibalized and done a lot of harm. And so what that would be now and how that would play out now, I don't know. Nobody knows.
We've actually got a plethora of questions, but what I'm going to do is ask you one more from the live feed, and then we actually need to go through our CPD point questions. So because we've been very content heavy, so it would be wonderful to be able to idiot proof the answers, so that when you send me the answers back, I can give you all certified certificates. So let me just ask one more question that I'm seeing in the feed. With distancing a major part of the new normal, are we needing essentially to provide? Oh, and the distance, it just disappeared. There you go. I'm going to go back. Are we going to provide more space for everything that is in a public space use?
I don't know what the question exactly.
Okay, so do you think we now need to design with more spatial awareness than we have previously? Do you think we're going to go back to a routine spatial awareness as we did prior to COVID, or is there going to be a new normal with our spatial planning?
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Spaces are finite. Buildings have been built with a certain rental return. Those things have been put in place. The money has been borrowed. The returns. I mean, you can't just now change things. You can't give the guy the space next door as well. The numbers won't stack. But I think there'll be partnerships. I think to some extent, landlords have pulled back and they have come to the party. But space is finite, and things will happen. For example, I think because we spoke also earlier about the fact that there's less cars on the road, and people are taking more public transport. Well, they are not taking more public transport. But there's a lot of people walking a lot more, and a lot more bicycles on the road. E-bikes have exploded. They're everywhere. And so I have a sense that a lot of pedestrian roads will be potentially given up for people, like a transformation of space, especially where down at the Rocks, where you have a lot of those restaurants sitting on those vehicular routes, that they'll give up some of that space, hopefully in like some kind of partnership for people to sit outside and use some of that space. New York, there's a lot of that happening on the streets, where parts of the road are just painted out and chairs and tables being put on the roads for people to use. So I think a lot of that kind of thinking needs to happen. Whether it'll happen, I don't know, but that kind of thinking needs to happen, like partnerships with state, partnerships between landlord and tenants. A lot more partnership thinking will solve some of that, not all of it.
There's a funny question here, which is, how do we convince our clients to pay more for our services?
I don't know, so again, I touched on that earlier. The problem with us, with designers and architects, the problem, and we can only protect it up to a certain point, is that it has become very democratized. The kind of technology that's out there, and the kind of information that's out there, and all the kind of tools that really kind of shrunk our little watering hole tremendously. And so, the thing has always been, and that's why marketing and advertising guys will slaughter me, but that space of marketing and advertising, has always been quite mysterious. And where there's mystery, there's margin. The mystery is out of our game to a large extent. And so I don't know if we can demand. I think if we self-educate and we learn a lot more, and we can offer a lot more information and detail and insight really into the way consumers will behave and what we can design for them, that we can add to the brief. I think potentially there, if we can flex our muscles there, we would have a chance to flex our muscles in terms of our fees.
So a little bit of mystery.
Yeah.
A little bit of mystery is a good thing, right? I mean, it always makes me laugh that you don't invite a GP over and say, "Can you just have a look at this bump?" But how many times do you arrive at somebody's house and they say, "What would you do here?" And I think, for $300 an hour, I'm happy to tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, look, what we're going to do is throw to our Q&A. So if you can, I'm going to just read out the questions that you have in your CPD, your 5 questions, and perhaps you can give us a glimpse into the answers so that we're all on the same page and can obviously find our certification. The first question was, what are these coherent proposals in the new normal, and what can we do as designers and architects to prepare ourselves? Your thoughts there?
Well, I think I've touched on a lot of that. Nothing is ever designed without the end user in mind. It is we touched on empathy. Nothing is ever solved without really solving it for some kind of a use, whether it's space or a piece of furniture or whatever that may be. So it is really about really understanding the new normal, and trying to place yourself in in that. Technology has been fantastic in that space, where the UX and we have UX officers, and they've kind of the dam walls have burst around that industry with keeping up with what that user experience should be. So if we can identify that more clearly and succinctly, and be far more mindful, as opposed to shape and place making and form and all of that and finishes. A big I'm going off kilt a little bit, but a big evil in my mind for a long time has been things like Pinterest. Pinterest, that's not design, and true quality design is a thing that they call silent design, where it's so subliminal, it's so subtle. Like, for example, in a bank, where it's mainly older people. I must watch out how I say it. Older people that go to a bank. So a chair in a bank should not be at the traditional 450 or 460. It should be at 600 or thereabouts, because you get up and down, and there's older people getting up and down, and that's silent design. So that's empathy. So understanding a lot more of that, and really putting a lot more content out there. I think if we can share content, put content out, so we can really design for that in any brief that we get, I think we're answering a lot of those questions.
Wonderful. Question 2, what do we need to watch out for, and what new value could we potentially bring?
I mean, again, I think I touched on that. It's definitely out with the old and in with the new. The way a lot of we don't know how much patterns we have formed ourselves. If I think, I'm 53. I qualified when I was 23. So what is that? Gosh, it's 30 years of doing what I've been doing, and a lot of it's my own habits of assuming that people will do things in certain ways, and assuming that people behave. And so we need to arm ourselves, we need to educate, and we need to unpack and renew. And we've taken done a lot of self, or let's call it just questioning everything that we do know, to say, if some of the work, if space is needed, how small can we make a table? Do we need a table that's 800 by 800 or 850 by 850? And why is that? Well, it's that because we've always done it that way. And always doing something that way is no longer going to be good enough. So can we do it longer and narrower and create more space? It's really unpacking every single thing that we've come to accept, is to go back and strip it and pack it up, or really apply design thinking. I think design thinking is going to really explode now again, to question every single habit, behavior, and use that we may have been a little bit reluctant to do. And it's difficult when you get paid per hour, and
Yes.
somebody wants you to do something, and now it's ready to get the outcome. You have to unpack a lot of things, but I think it's going to be necessary.
Okay. Question 3, who is this new user that we need to respond to?
So I think we would need to be mindful that development of that new user, something we're going to have to watch every single day. It's going to reveal in little bits as things open up, and as things. So it's an evolutionary user that'll be different tomorrow even than that user is today. It's a user that doesn't know itself exactly where the boundaries are. So the reason that is in there, I think, is it's it's a user that is possibly radically different month from now than that user is today. So it's a well, I can only put it as evolutionary and something that I think if we do observation, we're going to have to observe that behavior almost daily. And part of the things that is there's a book that I love that I read, and some people may know it, called Why We Buy by Paco Underhill. And what he did for many years, he would train cameras just in undergrounds, in parking areas, in entrances to train stations and corners, restaurants, and just see what people do in retail. And he said he never really cared about why people do things. It's just what they do.
Mm.
Often they don't know why they do it. It's just what they do. And I think that end user is we're going to have to be incredibly mindful and incredibly aware and incredibly insightful about that. That's
Wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the final question here, and I'm sure there are a million other questions, but if we can answer this last one for the tribe, what are some of the appropriate social and environmental considerations?
So part of the thing, I mean, Lee Ilkwa talks to this. Everybody really talks to this environmentally. That a lot of the things that we ignored before, we now really have to be mind. We have to sit up straight now and really take note of it. We can't simply be importing stuff en masse from China, for all the reasons. We can't simply be throwing. I mean, I'm absolutely in love with this country. Who wouldn't be? It's remarkable, but I've never seen the amount of items that gets discarded on street corners that actually it's perfect for reuse.
Yes.
It shouldn't have been thrown away in the first place. Potentially a lot, and I think so. Environmentally, we, the tiny home movement is part of that. The getting by with less, all of those things are accelerating now at a speed that, and it's going to be problematic for a lot of retailers. But we need to get ahead of that curve instead of resisting it. It's not going away. And as designers, we need to be hyper aware and informed of how we can bring that to the table. Our clients are not going to be. They're not really going to ask it. Well, why would they want to ask it? All they want to, seriously, they care about a profit. They're in business for a profit. And if they weren't in business for a profit, they wouldn't be in business. So it's our responsibility. We have that responsibility on top of getting paid less.
Unless we can convince them to pay more, right? But I think that it's all about sustainability and recycling. I mean, the one thing that I do love about Caroma is that we were the inventors of the first dual flush, and in as much we save Australia the same amount of water under the harbour bridge every year. So I think if it's a social and environmental conscience, and if we're all doing our portion, and if that's convincing clients accordingly, then I think we've done our bit. We can only do our portion in the scenario, right?
100%.
So it was an absolute pleasure having you join us this evening, Callie. We did enjoy it. What I would suggest to those who are out there listening and live streaming, if you can send your CPD questionnaires to myself, I will in due course get your points to you. But Callie will be available to answer any of your questions on the Facebook Live feed either today and or tomorrow should you come back to watch it, if you're happy to do that, Callie. I'm sure if there are those of you who'd like to talk to Callie directly, if you have a look at the form that I sent you, it will have his contact details. I'm sure that there will be obviously people that want Callie to get involved in collaborations or projects that perhaps you're doing at the moment that are pertinent to post-COVID design. I'm sure he'd be open to discussing the same and to have private conversations that might unfold questions that I can't answer right here and now with and for Callie. I'm quite sure he'd be more than happy to make himself aware of those. So Callie, thank you so much for joining us this evening. An absolute pleasure to have you in the Caroma Temple, and we'd love to have you back again.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So Please don't feel the need to rush off. Any questions on Facebook, we're more than happy to take some of those in. I will be sending an EDM out on Monday with further CPD points, and we trust that you stay safe and well. And please feel free to come and see us in the space and have a coffee and a virtual hug if nothing else. So thank you so much, and again, Vanessa Trow for the producing this evening. Thank you again once again for Vanessa for doing such a wonderful job. Enjoy and stay safe until we see you next time.